Our firm, on a weekly basis, files claims for clients in the six figures of US dollars. So things can get expensive very, very quickly. Don't become a GoFundMe campaign. With the public system, you're admitted to a ward. That ward could have 6 or 8 other patients in the ward with you to where you're just separated by a curtain. Sometimes they don't even have enough beds to where they just put like a mat on a floor to where you're literally on a floor hooked up to an IV waiting to be treated when there's an open bed.
In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most important and often overlooked topics for anyone considering a move to Mexico or abroad: health insurance. Healthcare is one of the most important questions we get from our viewers and consultation clients. How much does it cost? Do you really need insurance if medical care in Mexico is so affordable? And what happens if you face a medical emergency? To help us unpack all of this, we're joined by Brett LaMar, a licensed international health insurance broker with years of experience guiding foreigners through the maze of healthcare options. So good morning, Brett. How are you?
I'm doing great, Antonetta. How are you today?
Good. Happy Mexican Independence Day.
Yeah, Feliz Independencia.
Were you able to get some rest last night? It was a late one in our neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a residential community, but there definitely was some celebrations for El Grito last night around midnight.
Yeah.
You know, you hear all the fireworks go off and all the screams. So, Viva Mexico.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Viva Mexico. So, Brett, we broke up this discussion into 3 separate parts we'd like to get into, starting with why insurance abroad matters and transitioning into choosing the right plan, and then a little discussion on cost and savings. But before we get into all of that, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the company that you work for.
Well, my name is Brett LaMar. I'm a senior insurance broker. My specialty is working with expats, immigrants, nomads, remote workers, just basically anyone that is living away from or traveling away from their home country of passport. I specialize in the Latin America market, specifically Mexico, but we do service worldwide. But my focus is mostly on the Latin American market. A little bit about my background. I'm a former United States Marine, honorably discharged. And I also moved to Mexico from Denver, Colorado with my wife, Brooke. We've been living abroad for a total of about 13 years, maybe going on 14, 15 years total, because we used to live in Southeast Asia, in Bangkok, Thailand, for about 3 years. Then we went back to the United States, lived in Denver, Colorado, and then we immigrated from the United States to Mexico and became permanent residents about 11 years ago. I spent a lot of time in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I'm currently in Querétaro, Mexico, but just due to the nature of my business, I travel frequently. You know, I'm in Mexico City, Querétaro, San Miguel, Cabo, Puerto Vallarta. You know, I get around often just due to my client bases all throughout Mexico. But like I had said, specializing in health and life insurance for people that are living or moving away from their home country of passport. The company that I work for is Expat Insurance. I'm an independent broker, so we're not captive to just one insurance company. We have access to over 15 different insurance companies, over 100 different policy options. So we get the client what they need. We don't just try to push them into one specific policy.
Well, I tell you what, trying to navigate the health insurance world on your own, I can't imagine how people do it, and I'm so glad that there are people like you that can facilitate all that for us. This is one of the biggest struggles that we had 17 years ago when we first moved down here, was how the heck to find the right insurance coverage, because we knew we wanted it, but where to start, where to go, who to talk to. And this is why we wanted to do this call with you, to share you with our audience. And we'll put the information on how everybody can get a hold of you in our show notes. Let's get into why insurance matters. This is a loaded subject, but a lot of people think they don't need health insurance. And what would you say is the biggest misconception about that?
Well, a lot of people that move to Mexico, one of the biggest reasons people immigrate to Mexico is because their money goes further than it would in the United States or Canada. So along with that, they think that healthcare is going to be cheap and affordable. Many people that immigrate abroad don't do their due diligence on what medical costs can be, because it certainly is very, very affordable for minor issues. You know, if you're going to just treat a common cold, a case of bronchitis, Moctezuma's revenge from the taco stand, those minor issues are very, very affordable. Your routine health care is very affordable. Mammograms, pap smears, blood labs, EKGs, x-rays, all that, very affordable. But what is not affordable and what can really be a financial burden on people moving abroad is when they have major medical events, such as hospital admissions to the emergency rooms, surgeries, chronic conditions such as cancer, heart attacks, strokes, knee replacements, hip replacements. Those things that, might not come to top of mind because, people are like, oh, I'm healthy. I'm not going to have a heart attack. But I mean, like, there's NBA players that are in perfect health condition that have heart attacks on the court. So we just never know when one of those major medical events can happen. I always recommend, if you're traveling abroad, always have short-term emergency medical insurance, or if you're moving abroad, have a major medical policy. These will give you access to the private hospitals in Mexico, because when you're in Mexico, you have the private system and the public system. And the majority of people want to be treated in the private hospitals because you're going to have access to, bilingual staff. You're going to have access to more Western medical practices that you're used to having in the United States or Canada. They're going to be fully supplied, fully staffed. They're fully funded places, so you're going to get the top-notch care. So that, I would say, is the biggest myth, is that, yes, some medical care in Mexico is affordable, but a lot of the major medical expenses become very unaffordable. Our firm, on a weekly basis, files claims for clients in the six figures of US dollars. So things can get expensive very, very quickly. It's just very... I cannot stress enough how important it is to do the due diligence on your medical plan when you're moving abroad.
We know firsthand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We haven't gone into the hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical expenses, but we certainly have had our share of surgeries here in Mexico and can attest to how valuable having international health insurance has been to us personally. And then we see a lot of people here that, for one reason or another, have chosen not to get health insurance, and then next thing you know, you see a GoFundMe page
Trying to raise money to pay for their medical bills.
That's one of my advertisement slogans is, don't become a GoFundMe campaign.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just so not necessary. It's not worth the risk. And I get it. It's like when you get insurance, you're gambling against your health, right? But you have to just, it's better safe than sorry.
Because you never know when you're going to need it. You don't want to need it, but when you do need it, it's there and it's important.
Yeah, for sure.
We always insure our cars. We always insure our homes. We need to insure our bodies as well.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And when we feel good, we don't think about these things, but it's a mindset. What is the difference between Mexican healthcare versus the US healthcare and Canadian healthcare in general, but especially when it comes to emergencies?
Well, in the private system, the biggest difference that I would say that stands out is the level of care and the bedside manner from the hospital administration to the doctors. Like you guys, I'm an insurance client, but I've also been a patient in a hospital too. And I've been in a hospital for surgery. My wife has had a procedure here as well. It is unbelievable the care that you receive and the amount of time that you get with the doctors. When I was in the United States, I would spend more time with nurse practitioners, and then it just seemed like the doctor was coming in to check the work of the nurse practitioner for like the last 5 minutes and moving on. And it just felt like a factory. here I feel like a human being and a person that they actually care about. So that is just the biggest difference that I see. I mean, even when you get a discharge from the hospital or you have a relationship with the doctor, they give you their personal WhatsApp number to where they communicate with you after the fact to make sure everything's going well. Do you have any questions? They don't limit you to just only contact me during business hours. It's an open line of communication that you have with your doctor. So I would say that is the biggest difference between US Canadian system and here in Mexico.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly one can be seen by a specialist. You don't have to go to your primary to get a referral that then maybe is scheduled for 6 months from now. You can
Exactly.
go directly
You could
to the
go
specialist.
directly to a specialist. No referrals or anything like that are needed from a general practitioner. Many people don't even really have a GP. They just go to the doctor that specializes in exactly what diagnosis that they have or the symptoms that need to be treated.
Yeah, we love that. We love that about healthcare here. It's blown us away how many times the doctors have given us their WhatsApp number, and you've had communication with your doctors at any time of the day or night. And they'll respond.
Yeah, they respond.
Yeah.
So, and also going back to, I'm not a Canadian, but I know more Canadians now than I ever did in my life, even though we shared a closer border with them when I lived back in the United States. But one of the biggest things I hear about the Canadian system is they're on more of like a socialized public system rather than the private, and the waiting periods that they have to endure for like critical illnesses can be months to get in for a critical surgery, to where there really is no waits here. If you need a surgery in Mexico, they're going to get you in because the doctors are not captive to one hospital per se. They rent the space from whichever hospital is available. So I've had clients that need like heart stents that are scheduled a day later, 2 days later, or knee replacements within a week, hip replacements within a week. Personally, I had torn my medial and my lateral meniscus on a hike. I had a surgery as soon as the swelling went down. So, I mean, there's just no waiting periods to be scheduled for, things that you want to get taken care of rather than just sit around thinking, I'm going to be in pain for how long or what could happen if I don't get this done. It's really good to have access to the care that you need and when you need it.
In my experience, I had shoulder surgery just this last April, and within a week, we got it approved by the insurance company, and within 2 weeks, I had my surgery. That's how fast it all went.
Right.
And I don't think that can happen in other places.
One of the things we often hear about the reasons why people may not choose to get health insurance, international health insurance, is because they have this belief that the Mexican healthcare system is for everyone, similar to the Canadian system. But what's the difference there? Why is it important to get health insurance in Mexico?
Sure. So the system that you're talking about is IMSS. Some people call it EAMS. So this public system was created for the working class of Mexico. So when you're employed in Mexico, your employer pays half of your EAMS fee, and then the employed person pays the other half of the EAMS fee. And that gets you access to the public system. If you're a temporary or a permanent resident of Mexico, which means you're an immigrant, you're also eligible to enroll in the EAMS system, but there's a very, very big difference between the public and the private system. First of all, most Mexican nationals that can afford private insurance get private insurance because they don't want to be subject to the public system either. So with the public system, you're going to be running into a lot of the same issues as we just spoke about with the Canadians, the waiting periods. There's very long wait periods to get procedures done. That's due to either a staffing issue, a funding issue, or a supply issue. This system is stressed. It is really, really stressed. It's underfunded, it's undersupplied, and it's understaffed. In addition, When you're admitted to like a private hospital, you get a private room that's more like a hotel suite. When you're admitted to an EAMS hospital, you're admitted to a ward. That ward could have 6 or 8 other patients in the ward with you to where you're just separated by a curtain. Sometimes they don't even have enough beds to where they just put like a mat on a floor to where you're literally on a floor hooked up to an IV waiting to be, treated when there's an open bed. Like I had said, that there's long waiting periods. There's typically no cafeterias. So food has to be brought to you on a daily basis from friends or family members. Also, toiletries have to be brought to you by friends or family members. Like I had said, the nursing staff is very understaffed. So like that friend or family member is also going to be in charge of your bathing while you're in there as well. So it's just a very, very big difference that most people that are immigrants here are not used to and would be shocked to experience if that's what they subjected themselves to. But that is what the people are referring to when they come to Mexico and say, oh, they have free health insurance. Well, yeah, and that's not even free. As an immigrant, you still have to pay a fee to enroll into that, but it's much cheaper. But that's what you're subjecting yourselves to. Also, personally, for me, I think it's a moral issue. Like we're immigrants coming to Mexico. We're supposed to provide financial solvency to get residency, to be able to come here. And we should not be taking away from resources that are made from nationals just because we can. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should. But I understand that there is people that are here, they used to be on private health insurance. They no longer can afford it. They got priced out. Their financial situations have changed. So it is an option. And I think an option is better than no option.
True. And, in our case, we've lived here close to 20 years now, 17 years, and we work here. We could choose to opt into the IMSS system, but like you said, you kind of get what you pay for with these programs. The difference in healthcare that you get in the private sector is just incredible.
Yeah.
A personal suite is what it feels like. Nicer than
It's
more
better
fancy
than some
hotels.
hotel rooms I rent.
Yeah, it's a really nice fancy hotel room with amenities in the bathroom and slippers, and they give you everything. It's pretty comfortable.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So why some people might think that they can maybe save a few bucks by contacting insurance companies directly and doing their own homework and their own due diligence that way and skipping the broker altogether. What would you say to the people that have that mindset?
I would say you're going to pay the exact same price going direct to the insurer as you would through a broker. There is no price discounts going direct to the insurance company. Actually, you're doing yourself a disservice because you don't really want to deal with an insurance company because you're not. This isn't your forte. A broker had to go through licensing. We had to go through all the procedures that each insurance company has, and they're all different. We know how to facilitate that for you, but when you're choosing a broker, you need to make sure that the broker that you choose is just not a salesperson, because there are brokers out there that will just sell insurance and then hand you the policy and say, thank you very much, I'll contact you at renewal. You don't want that. You want a full service brokerage, which is what I offer and my firm offers. So when you become my client or my firm's client, we have a full bilingual claim staff to where either myself personally or my claim staff is going to be handling all of your direct billing arrangements, all of your claims submissions, any type of appeals that need to be done in the future or anything like that. We handle all of that for you. And that is provided at no additional cost. The insurance companies pay us because typically insurance companies don't advertise. We are their advertising arm and their education arm. I feel more like an educator the majority of the time rather than a sales rep. I'm here to educate people on their options, how things work, and if they like the product, then they can go ahead and purchase it. But then we provide that full service white glove concierge service to your policy.
Again, we can attest firsthand to that. We work with a broker that has been instrumental in facilitating the process.
And that's why we were able to get my surgery approved in 1 week, because they basically took it over and they just got it done.
Yeah.
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 That's called the pre-approval process. So basically, any non-emergency procedures, medical procedures, need to be pre-approved. That way, they can negotiate the price, make sure that it is an approved procedure, and then they'll issue what's called a guarantee of payment to the provider. So that way, direct billing can take place, and you're only responsible for the deductible.
Yeah, it's been marvelous working with an insurance broker in that respect.
Yeah.
In all
Fantastic.
respects, honestly. And if there's no extra cost to the consumer, why wouldn't you do that, right?
Yeah. Key
Tell us
thing
a little
is,
bit
though,
of-
make sure that your broker provides that service,
Yeah.
not just
True.
sales.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to somebody, ask the question.
Ask
right?
those questions.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about medical evacuation insurance, and is that something that's included automatically in the coverage that people get, or is that something that's supplemental, and is that important even to worry about?
So, medical evacuation insurance is something that is either bundled into an annual policy or it is separate, although the two are very different. So, the medical evacuation that would be bundled into an annual insurance major medical policy or catastrophic policy is to get you to the nearest facility that can treat you, not get you back home to continue your medical care back home. It is to get you to that nearest facility that can treat you. For example, you're hiking out in the jungle or you're in a remote area of Mexico and you have an accident and there's no hospital nearby, or there's a regional hospital nearby, but they don't have the equipment to be able to treat you, and a ground ambulance is just too far. That would kick in a medical evacuation to that nearest facility that can treat you, whether it be like Guadalajara, Monterrey, Mexico City, or Querétaro, the major metropolitan areas that have the facilities to treat you. During the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of hospitals that got full, and we were transporting people to Mexico City or Guadalajara to be treated during the pandemic because the hospitals got full in some of the areas that tourists live in. So that is the type of medical evacuation that would be built into your annual major medical policy. And typically most of them do come with that: ground ambulance and air evacuation to get you to the nearest hospital. The other type is separate from your policy. And this is typically bought for people that, they're either priced out of insurance and they have their provincial plan still back in Canada, or they're over the age of 65 and they're US citizens and they have Medicare back in the United States. Typically, the person that buys this type of evacuation insurance has primary health insurance back in their home country, because it will evacuate you to your city, state, and hospital of choice, whether that be in Canada or the United States. The one caveat to that type of coverage, though, is you're responsible for any stabilization that is required up to the evacuation. So you have to be aware of that, because these policies are fairly inexpensive, the medical evacuation policies. And the reason why is because it's just the evacuation. Pays for none of the stabilization for you to be evacuated. And you cannot be evacuated unless you're stabilized, because they don't want to risk having to bring the plane down in the middle of an evacuation. So those are the two types of medical evacuation that is available.
Okay. So going back to the medical evacuation coverage that's bundled into your international health insurance plan. If we were to take a trip to, I don't know, Cambodia or something, and something major happens there where we need to be transported back, are they going to fly us back to Mexico? Is that covered? Or are they just going to get us to a hospital in Cambodia to treat us?
So the one that's bundled into your international policy is going to get you to the nearest hospital that can treat you in Cambodia, because that's where your event took place. Repatriation, if your annual policy has medical repatriation insurance built into it, after you're done with the medical event, they would repatriate you back to Mexico to continue your medical care. So that's a different type of clause in an annual major medical policy.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big difference. And I don't know if you can hear the background. The Independence Day celebrations have continued, and so we've got drum beats going on back there. So
It's a parade.
I can't hear anything here.
okay, we just hear them
You're
off in the
good.
distance, getting closer and closer. So we'll see what happens. All right. So that was an interesting conversation we just had about why insurance matters. So let's move on now to choosing the right plan, and just starting with what the differences are between international health insurance versus country-specific health insurance, whether it's Mexico or some other country.
Well, I would say that the way I differentiate the two is you have international insurance and then you have national private insurance. Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
Exactly.
So the differences between international insurance and national private insurance is number one, waiting periods. Typically with international insurance, the waiting period is 30 days until the full benefits of the policy kick in. When you're dealing with national insurance, you're dealing with longer waiting periods because typically these are for Mexican nationals, and Mexican nationals don't wait until their 50s or 60s to get insurance. So they have time for these waiting periods to, be met, which can be 30-day, 6-month, 12-month, 24-month, and 48-month waiting periods for specific conditions. So that's one thing that is a big difference. Another is typically with the national policies, they're all in Spanish, to where the international policies are all in English. And typically with the national policies, you're dealing with not a bilingual company that will have bilingual people that will be able to speak to you if you have to call that company for something. So that's another difference. The international policies are priced in US dollars, to where the international policies are priced in pesos. So you'll be subject to the volatility of the peso. If you're making Canadian or US dollars, your policy could go up or down in 25% fluctuations year to year just because of the volatility of the peso, because you don't have a stable currency for your policy. Like, for example, a policy could look very cheap when the peso was 2021, but then it went down to 16 for a while. Well, if your renewal came when it was 16, even with your annual increase, you just got another increase because the peso went down, because the dollar, it weakened. So, or the Canadian dollar weakened. So that's another big difference between the two. Also, with the international policies, they're typically just an annual deductible per person per policy year. To whereas the national policies usually have a deductible and co-insurance per medical illness or event. So you could have different medical events or illnesses throughout the year. And with an international policy, you just have one deductible. That's all you're working towards for the policy year. With a national policy, it would be a deductible and a co-insurance per event or illness, lifetime. So if you had 3 separate medical events, or in that year, you could then incur 3 different deductibles and co-insurance for those events. So those are the biggest differences between the two. Typically, most immigrants go towards the international policies. The only times that I see people going with the national policies is if they're working in Mexico and they want a factura to be able to write off their health insurance policy against their Mexican taxes, because we can't issue facturas for the premiums on an international policy because it's not a Mexican company. So that's primarily the biggest differences between the two.
One thing that we noticed also kind of by accident is when we checked into Antonieta's surgery at the hospital the night before, they wanted to collect a deposit from us. And I said, it's already been pre-approved. Our insurance has been in contact with you, with your hospital, and it's already pre-approved. It's covered. I just kind of threw out the name of the insurance provider. And they said, the guy went to the back and spoke to somebody and came back and said, okay, you're fine. And then I asked him, well, why were you asking for this? And he said, well, a lot of the national plans don't cover certain things. And he included things like even like meals and things like that and certain medications. And that's why they collect a deposit for that, to cover the things that their insurance, the Mexican insurance plans don't cover. So that's something that I found fascinating about that. And sure enough, our insurance covered most of the things. There were a couple of like harder narcotic things that they didn't want to cover, but the rest of it was covered. So anyway, that was an observation that we had regarding national
point.
versus international. How do things like age, pre-existing conditions, and or residency status affect insurance coverage?
Yeah, one of the first things that I'm going to ask, first of all, is age, just to see if you're eligible to apply. Most all international policies need to be applied for prior to your 75th birthday. Once you apply and are approved prior to your 75th birthday, you have guaranteed renewability for life, and any conditions that develop underneath coverage are covered for life. The second question I usually ask is medical history, pre-existing conditions. This is one of the biggest things that people need to do their due diligence on before they move to Mexico, because pre-existing conditions are factored into medical underwriting. A lot of Canadians are not used to this, and a lot of US citizens are not used to this, especially US citizens after the Affordable Health Care Act was passed during the Obama administration, which forced private health insurance companies to include pre-existing conditions. So international insurance still medically underwrites all pre-existing conditions. Depending on the conditions, they can cause an auto denial, or they can cause exclusions, or they can cause restrictions, and in some circumstances, they can be included. So it is very good to be honest with your broker and upfront what medications you're taking, any pre-existing conditions, because you want to know kind of how that may be treated during the underwriting process. And there are over 40 conditions that cause automatic denials.
What are examples of those?
The biggest ones that I see people getting auto declined for is HIV positive, mental health issues such as major depression, bipolar type 1, schizophrenia, type 1 diabetic, which means that you're taking insulin, or BMI, which is your body mass index. So if your BMI is higher than a 35, it makes you uninsurable as well. Of course, if you have any active, like you have a diagnosis that needs to be treated, you can't get insurance when you already need surgery, or you have a active cancer. Like if you're already receiving care for like cancer, you can't get insurance unless you're in remission for at least 1 year. And of course, if you have a diagnosis to where you've already been recommended to get surgery, then you can't get insurance until that surgery is done.
Now, in the example that somebody signs up for international health insurance, and then having this coverage already, that person develops a condition of some kind, and they want to switch to a different insurance provider, will that new insurance provider cover that condition, or will they lose that coverage? Okay.
So anytime that you're switching policies, that's why I highly recommend when anybody gets a major medical policy, look at it for the long term. Because if you're thinking, oh, this is cheaper now than this one, but the other one's more cheaper when I'm older than this one, so I'll just switch to that one, and 5 years later, well, you're risking, if you develop any pre-existing conditions underneath coverage of your current policy, those are covered for life as long as you renew. But if you switch policies to a different carrier, or even to a different policy with the same carrier, it is treated as a new application.
Wow, even with the same carrier?
Even with the same carrier if it's a different policy. Even in your own policy, if you change your deductible to a higher deductible, it is just a simple change form. But if you change your deductible to a lower deductible, meaning you're putting more responsibility on the insurance company, it's treated as a new application as well.
That's important to consider as we age and things get more expensive. Once you switch to the higher deductible, you're stuck.
Yeah, once you switch to the higher deductible, you're stuck. Unless you're still healthy. If you're staying the same current status from the change, you're okay. But you risk that. So it's always best to start at a conservative deductible, because you can always raise it in the future to lower your premiums. But once you raise it, just know if you stay healthy or you stay in the same current medical condition, it's okay to change it back down. But if you developed a condition, that condition could be excluded in changing the deductible back down.
Fascinating. Tell us, when you sit down with somebody for the first time, planning their move, what's the first thing you look at to guide them towards the right coverage?
Well, like I had said, the age and the pre-existing conditions are going to be number one. The next is going to be the geographical area that they're needing coverage in. We offer policies that are just Latin America. We offer policies that are worldwide, excluding the United States. And then we offer policies that are worldwide, including the United States. So those are the top three drivers would be, age, pre-existing conditions, geographical area of coverage. The next is going to come down to just finding the plan that fits their budget. That is still a good plan because there are cheaper plans out there, but you're either sacrificing coverage or you're sacrificing access to direct billing to where it'll most likely result in a reimbursement type situation to where you're going to have to pay up front for your medical services and then file a claim for reimbursement. That's the four main drivers there, I'd say.
And when you're looking at retirees versus digital nomads versus families, how should each of these three groups look at their international health coverage differently?
Well, most of those would be more geographical. If you're talking about younger people, you always want to make sure, are they planning to having a family in the future, to see if it has maternity coverage built into it. Because a lot of the international policies don't have maternity. So if you are looking to start or have a larger family, you need to make sure that policy has that maternity coverage built into it. Also, if you're talking about like a digital nomad or a remote worker, many of these policies have residency restrictions. Not per se, do you have permanent or temporary residency in whatever country you're living in? What is your de facto residency? Like de facto residency is basically which country are you living in for at least 6 months out of the policy year? That becomes your de facto residency country because that's going to be based on what your rate of premium is. If you come to me and you say, Brett, I don't stay in one country for more than 6 months, I'm traveling all over, then we need to be looking at a nomad style policy that allows you that flexibility to basically just roam with your policy and roam with your coverage and not be tied to one region.
Okay. And when you file a claim, when the person files a claim, does the insurance company ask for proof of residency or passport or, passport stamps in and out of the country and that sort of thing?
I personally have not experienced it yet. But that's not to say you're not going to be the next one that gets asked. By signing the documents for the policy, you are giving them the right to ask for that. If you can't provide boarding passes or if you can't provide passport stamps, then the last result is Homeland Security records.
What about take our situation, for instance, we live in Mexico, but in the future we may want to move to a different country. Is there a change in policy price depending on the country that you reside in?
Yes. For example, Europe's much cheaper than Mexico. Mexico's actually the most expensive in Latin America. Mexico, in the 10 plus years I've been living here, it's insane. The cost of medical has gone up significantly. We see it in claims and we see it in premiums. So that myth again about Mexico is cheap. It's just not the case with medical so much anymore when it comes to the major medical events and chronic care and chronic illnesses.
And does that move trigger then pre-existing conditions?
Well, a lot of the international policies, like for example, we have policies, they will only write them if your primary residence is Mexico or Latin America. So if you move to Europe or Southeast Asia, you would be forced to go with a different company.
Interesting.
Okay, but in terms of the plans that you cover, they're for people that live in Mexico, but also other parts of Latin America. And as long as you're within the Americas, then you're going to be all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, unless you get one of those nomad policies that allow you to be portable with where you're located.
Okay.
But yeah, many of the international policies, like the ones that the brokers, myself included, provide to people that are immigrating to Mexico or Latin America. Latin America has to be your primary residence for at least 6 months out of the year. If you were to move to Europe, it could force you into a different policy. And then you're subject to that new underwriting again.
Wow. Okay.
That's important.
Very good to know.
For us and for everybody. Now, for those that still think that they can self-fund their medical coverage, can you give us some examples of real-world costs for certain medical cases?
It's going to vary. to the hospital. If you're in, say, like Puerto Vallarta, Cancun, Tulum, Playa del Carmen, or Cabo San Lucas, the prices are just so much more than like Guadalajara or Mexico City or Merida or not Merida or Monterrey. I'm more used to dealing with the more tourist areas and their pricing levels because that's primarily where a lot of people like to immigrate to. So, like for example, a hip replacement, depending on the level of the hip that you get, could be anywhere because there's different tiers of hips that you can get. Anywhere from say high 15 to 20,000 to 35 to $40,000. Same to go with a knee replacement in that same range. I had arthroscopic knee surgery done for my meniscus that I was talking about earlier. That was around 35,000 US dollars. If you need like a heart stent, depending on the amount of stents that you need, it could be anywhere from like $30,000 to $100,000. Open heart surgery, $75,000 to $150,000. Strokes, depending on, with strokes, it's a long hospital admission. So, you're in the hospital for a longer amount of time, and then it depends if they have the stroke buster medication to be able to give you to break up the clot, to allow oxygen back to your brain. Strokes can be in the anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. But like I had said, we have people that max out $500,000 policies in one medical event. And that's usually due to ICU stays. Like we've had a client get a very rare blood disorder that he was in the ICU for, over 4 months, it was 3 months that he was back in. So it was about 4 months that he was in, and it maxed out a $500,000 policy. We had another one to where somebody was going in for a nephrectomy, kidney, to remove one of the kidneys, and had a heart attack during the surgery. And that was, $450,000 claim because he was in the ICU for so long afterwards. So those are just some real world examples, of what it can cost. If you just break your arm and you just simply need casted, or a splint, or you're probably not going to meet your deductible if you have a $5,000 deductible. So that's going to be pretty much out of pocket. If you go to a GP just for a regular random visit, it's 600 pesos. Specialists, maximum 1,200 pesos. So those things are going to be very, very affordable. And most likely, you're never going to get to your deductible with those. So these policies are to protect you from those major financial burdens.
Very interesting. And something that just popped into my mind is our particular plan waived the deductible altogether after 3 years of not filing any claims.
Yeah.
Which for us was a great thing because we hadn't filed claims for years. And then we had two major surgery events.
Yeah.
That we didn't have to pay for. It was fantastic. So, yeah.
Yeah, some of them do have that deductible reduction if you don't have claims for 3 years. Some have like 50% deductible reduction if you have an emergency or a serious accident in your resident country. So you just have to look at the different policies. Typically, when a client comes to me, I'm going to give them about 3 different options to just give a wide range of coverage and pricing, just so they can make a decision on what's comfortable for them. So you really have to go over the policy. It's called the summary of coverage to look at those details. And I provide those with all of my clients that I quote.
Now, in the case of Antonieta's shoulder surgery, we did it at Ángeles Centro Sur in Querétaro, and we were actually quite surprised at the price. It was around, all in, it was around $25,000. And what popped into our minds was, is the hospital and the doctors, are they charging us more because they know we have the insurance? Would that be the same price that they would charge somebody that's uninsured?
No, insurance has a different price.
Higher.
It's higher. Yes. They have to factor in that they're financing that surgery because it takes sometimes for the biggest delay is the hospital sending over all the medical records to the insurance company so they can actually finalize the negotiations of the bill and settle. So you'll get what's called an explanation of benefits. Antonetta, you should probably receive that for your surgery as well. You might see what the initial cost was that they charged the insurance company, and then there'll be a discount that was negotiated. and then the actual price that they paid the hospital, because there is negotiations that happen between the insurer and the provider behind the scenes that typical people don't look into, and most people don't review their EOBs, which is the explanation of benefits, but you'll see that. But there is a cash rate for all services at hospitals that is cheaper. That discount is typically, around like 20% cheaper.
Okay. All right. So it's not that much of a difference, but
No, it's not that much of a distance, but it is a difference. Like I said, they're waiting to get that money to get paid, so it's almost like they're financing it. It's just common practice everywhere in the world. Insurance gets charged at a higher rate.
Right. And of course, if we have the insurance, we're going to want to go get treated at the best hospital we can find versus, let's save 100,000 pesos and go to the less expensive hospital.
No.
Yeah, that's the good thing with these policies is they allow you to choose where you want your service to be provided. Within some have open networks, majority of them have open networks, but open network doesn't mean that they're always going to have direct billing. So, you have to make sure that, they have a relationship with that provider to where you're going to be on a direct billing basis rather than a reimbursement basis. And that's why, like Antoinetta, she said she had to go through that pre-approval process, and that's part of that pre-approval process.
Excellent. All right. So, Brett, if somebody wanted to work with you, what are the steps that they will be taking towards signing up for international health insurance?
Yeah, well, we're not able to submit applications until 45 days prior to an effective date. And all insurance companies issue policies on the 1st and the 15th of each month. But that doesn't mean you have to wait to speak to me until 45 days before you're ready. We can get things fast-tracked, and some people have automatic approvals in 24 hours. But a lot of people have, these days, medical conditions. There's not a lot of healthy people out there these days. And I recommend that people start their due diligence as soon as possible. I think 3 years is a bit too excessive. 2 years, maybe even a bit excessive, but within a year, preferably like within 3 months or 4 months prior to actually needing the insurance is enough time to get some due diligence done. But some people, want to make sure it's practical before they move or even think about it. So don't think that you can't contact me a year out just to get an idea of the rates, because it could be the decision maker. Reaching out to me is the best way to contact me is through my website. It's my name, brettlamar.com. Like you had mentioned in the beginning, I'm sure you're going to include that in the show notes. Also, I'm always available on WhatsApp, which you can find on my website, or by email, which is also on my website as well. But the best way is just to go to my website and submit a quote form. So you're able to reach me that way, or you're just WhatsApp or email. Either way, you can always reach me.
I remember when we signed up, there were certain things that were excluded. There was a waiting period before we could actually file claim for certain things. So with that in mind, if somebody is thinking about moving to Mexico or somewhere within the next, year to 2 years, would you advise them to go ahead and get the health insurance now while they're still in their original country of residence, so that when they move, they're covered?
Yeah, so we're able to put an effective date of whatever you would like. So if you want, like I had mentioned previously, the typical waiting period is 30 days until the full benefits of the policy kick in. Although during the waiting period, you're covered for any serious accidents or infectious diseases that result in a hospitalization. It's just everything else needs to wait until that waiting period is exhausted. So some people will make the effective date be 30 days prior to their boots on the ground in Mexico, so they're covered from day one. Some people are okay with that being covered for just serious accidents and infectious diseases, so they just make the effective date the day they arrive. And others that I suggest that have to go through medical underwriting, sometimes it's very, very difficult to get those things done in your home country. For example, it's very difficult to get an EKG unless you have a diagnosis in the United States or Canada. Like, it's very hard to get those scheduled. And a lot of, that are on high blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, or diabetes, they're going to have to get an EKG to submit with their application. So a lot of people will just wait to get all their medical done until they get in Mexico, because we can have an EKG done same day.
Yeah.
Lab results. We can get same day results on labs because the system here is efficient. So what I recommend for those people is to get a short-term emergency medical policy for the first 30 to 90 days when they arrive, just so they have peace of mind that they're covered. And it gives them time to get their annual coverage set up. And if their annual coverage gets set up earlier than the end date of their short-term emergency medical policy, we can cancel it and get a return of unused premium, prorated at the dates that's left on that, so they don't lose out on any money. And then there's no gaps of coverage.
Okay,
very nice.
yeah, that is really nice. In the case that somebody's applying for insurance and they get denied, there's a condition that gets excluded. Is it worth their while to then look for a different insurance provider to see if maybe they'll cover it?
I sometimes have clients, if I know like one insurer may be favorable over another, the risk that insurance companies allow changes sometimes on a yearly basis, monthly basis, weekly basis. It's just depending on how much risk their actuaries allow them to accept. So sometimes it is best to apply to a couple different ones to see who gives you the best offer. Although, like for example, with US citizens, I have a company that will cover all pre-existing conditions, majority of them. I can't say all, majority all pre-existing conditions if you're a US citizen, but it's much more expensive than the traditional policies. I also have another one, a company that will maybe give a little bit better of an offer than the traditional ones for certain conditions. But again, it's going to be pricier than the other ones. But it may be through like a deductible load. Like we'll cover that condition, but instead of your standard $2,500 or $5,000 deductible, your deductible to cover arterial hypertension, which is high blood pressure, will be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to include that condition on your policy. So if you had a medical event that was related to that condition that was tied to that deductible load, that would be your deductible for that medical event. But all other medical events that were not related to that condition are subject to your standard deductible that you chose.
Those higher priced plans that cover everything, how much are we talking about in terms of yearly premiums?
Yeah, I mean, it's all due to age, first of all. And then second of all, it goes down to the condition, because a lot of people ask that same question. And I say, all I can do is I can give you the base rate as if you were healthy. If you have a condition that they need to cover, they're going to rate it up. They're going to be like, that's a 25% premium increase, a 50% premium increase on the standard to include that condition. So we won't know that until you go through the medical underwriting. And there's no cost to apply for these insurance companies. The only cost that you may incur is if you are subject to exams, such as those EKGs or blood labs that I had spoken of, that you may have to do. If you're over the age of 65 and you're applying for insurance, everyone has to do medical underwriting, so exams. So typically with females, mammogram, pap smear, blood labs, EKG. Typically with a male, blood labs, EKG, and PSA. Those are for 65 plus. Everyone has to do that, that's 65 plus. If you're under 65, you just have the medical questions that are going to be on the application. And if you answer yes to any of those medical questions, then you might have to provide more disclosure.
So if you're younger than 65, you don't have to do it. You get your plan. And then once you've passed that 65-year-old threshold, you still don't have to do
Because you're not
any
applying.
underwriting.
You already have the policy.
And then speaking of age, is there a cutoff? You can't get covered above a certain age?
Yeah, I touched on that at the beginning. 74 is the age you have prior to your 75th birthday to have access to about 99% of the options. I have 2 options that allow you to apply to age 85, but be prepared for like premiums $15,000 to $20,000 a year.
That's huge. Wow. And if we're already covered, if we're already signed up to a plan before 75 years old, then we're covered for life, guaranteed?
Yeah, as long as once you have a policy and as long as you renew in the same policy, you have guaranteed renewability and guaranteed coverage for life. A lot of people will be like, Brett, I didn't file any claims. Why is my premium more? Well, they don't go up for your personal claims, never. It's not like a car insurance, like to where if you get in accidents, you get your premium becomes more expensive. My people that have those $500,000 claims, their premiums are no more than a male or a female their same age
Okay.
with the same policy. Your claims never directly affect your policy. It's basically your claims go into the pool. How much premiums did that specific policy you collect from everyone that has that policy? How much did that policy pay out in claims to everyone? Was the company still be able to make a profit? Because as we know, insurance is a for-profit business. So if they're not making a profit, they're going to raise the rates even higher.
Yeah.
All right. So one final question, and this is something that we sometimes get asked by our customers, is as you age, you may have to go into assisted living or long-term care like that. Do the insurance plans cover this?
that.
Just like the United States, that's called long-term care insurance when you would go into an assisted living facility. So long-term care insurance is not offered in Mexico, and it's not included in your policies. The only type of care similar to what you're talking to that could be built into one of these major medical policies is palliative care or hospice care. That's it. But not like if I'm just old and I can't take care of myself anymore and I need to go into a nursing home. That would be on your own. And there's very, very few nursing homes in Mexico. They're starting to pop up here and there, but the availability is nil because most Mexicans, the families take care of that person.
Thank you so much, Brett, for your time. This has been really, really informative. We're going to leave the link for those that want to get a hold of you in our show notes. And I didn't realize you were so close over in Querétaro. So maybe one of these days we can get together in person and do another one of these.
Fantastic. That'd be great. It was really nice speaking with you both. And I thank you so much for introducing me to your audience. You guys are doing a great job over there. And I hope you keep growing your channel because you're providing great information for people moving abroad or living abroad. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. If you would like to connect with Brett, we've linked his information in the show notes. And don't wait until an emergency happens. Get informed and protected before you move. And remember, if you're planning your move to Mexico, we can help guide you with one-on-one consultations and our San Miguel Neighborhood Guide. And we're also launching a brand new Move to Mexico Discovery Week at Antigua Capilla Boutique B&B. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Ciao.